we just had a shot of Paula Radcliffe's favourite starter. Now, you told me that he started you in under 13 races, Andy.
I think he might have done, certainly under 15 races. Alan Bell there getting the races underway, and he was quite funny at the start, at the technical meeting yesterday, warning all of the athletes that his gun is the only gun they must go on. It would be an electronic gun, and we weren't going to see any repeats of any other bangs from anywhere around that would get the race underway early.
Well, I don't know if that made you feel a bit older, but certainly talking about him starting you in under 30 and under 15 races made me feel pretty old. Anyways, you can see it's still, well, pitch dark, apart from the great lighting we got on the fast, flat streets of Dubai. Well into the first kilometre for the elite men and women, and the wheelchairs somewhere way up ahead. We're hoping to be giving you times at every kilometre, and of course the 5, 10, 15, etc. The 5K splits are going to be the most important, so we'll keep you up to date with just how fast both the men and women are going. Course record last year, incidentally, Mossinet Guerino, who hasn't come back this year, but he ran 2:04 exactly, and his compatriot, fellow Ethiopian Rosa Derecha, did 2:19.11. So two pretty swift course records, but they were followed very closely. I mean, it was blanket finishes in both races last year, Paula.
It was. So we had 6, 7 men under 2:05, was it last year?
Yeah.
So extremely fast racing, and together right into the final straightaway and racing right down to the line. So exciting races, which is what we like to watch, as well as fast times. It's good to get a really interesting race to watch.
Well, that's the pacemakers up ahead, and well, terrific lighting out on the streets here. I mean, I'm sure we both attended races where it's been pitch black. You're not being able to see race numbers sometimes.
No, this is very well lit, so good conditions. You can see the road surfaces here in Dubai are excellent underfoot as well. Smooth tarmac the whole way, which certainly helps the athletes and will help the fast times as well.
Now, how would you have prepared for a 6 a.m. start as an elite athlete?
It's a pretty early start for breakfast, getting up, I guess, around about, well, some of these guys, because it would mean so early, instead of a 2:30, 3 a.m. up and eat, maybe they will have just left it a little bit later, eating last night to be able to get a good night's sleep and then just get up and down to the course. They had to leave the hotel around about 4:30 a.m. this morning.
Well, that was pretty much 3 minutes on that kilometre, but that's just me seeing them passing the kilometre mark. It's probably a bit faster than that, probably up to 10 seconds faster, but oh no, in fact 3:01. We've got a trio of Japanese that you can see in that secondary group there. They're not quite as fast as some of the elite African runners who we're seeing here. Well, Adola's making his presence felt right in the lee of the pacemakers, Paula.
Yes, he's trained, I think, with a lot of these guys, certainly not the 3 pacemakers. The pacemakers in Group 1 are all Kenyan athletes, but I think he has trained with a group of them, including Tadessa Abraham of Switzerland, who is actually sitting in the second group further back. But he is aiming today set his sights high. He's aiming for that European record of Mo Farah 2:05.11 set in Chicago, and I think he said he wanted to go through halfway in around about 62:10, which he thought would be perfect. I think it's a little bit quick, but we'll see whether he's able to do that. He spent 5 weeks training with the group of Adola out in Ethiopia, so he certainly knows what kind of shape he's in and what he's capable of.
Well, just a reminder, as Paula said earlier, Guya Adola, the 28-year-old from Ethiopia, had a fantastic debut 15, 16 months ago in Berlin. where he actually led the Olympic champion and the undisputed world #1 marathoner Eliud Kipchoge for 40 out of the 42 kilometers, and was only beaten by about 14 seconds in the end. And he did a debut of 2 hours, 3 minutes and 46 seconds, which is pretty extraordinary, Paula.
Yes, it was. It completely, I think it shocked Eliud Kipchoge as much as maybe it didn't shock Gio Adola, but certainly Eliud Kipchoge was surprised to find somebody leading him to 40k and actually needing to be told to follow the blue line on the road during that race.
Well, we're just taking a look at the wheelchair racers. Couple of early leaders there, and a big gap of about 50 meters back to the third in that case.
There is Hoog in the silver helmet sitting tightly on the back wheel of the leader. Looks like the Japanese athlete there.
Well, there are 3 Japanese, Yamamoto, Nishida and Yoshida, and they're expected to push him, but at the moment it looks like a single Japanese out ahead of Marcel Hoog of Switzerland, who's the race favourite and benefiting from a bit of pacing by the looks of it.
Yeah, he has just moved to the side, but certainly appears to be drafting now as he tucks back in behind.
Well, drafting, of course, is the cycling term. That it's a lot easier to draft in cycling than running, isn't it? Well, yeah. Well, those 3 pacemakers with about 8 or 10 Kenyans and Ethiopians right behind them. This race, incidentally, was won by Kenyans when it began 20 years ago, but I think it's been 10 years, Paula, that Ethiopians have reigned here pretty much unchallenged. But we do have a couple of Kenyans who might make a difference. Well, certainly in the women's race, Ruth Chepngetich probably has got to be the big favourite today.
Yes, I would think that she would do, and we can see there the times have just flashed up for the 2nd kilometre, so an improvement. You could hear, I don't know if you could hear, but I could hear the bike urging the pacemakers on to pick up the pace, and that's reflected in that 2:53 for the 2nd kilometre. So just taking a little bit of time to get underway during the 1st kilometre, and now getting down on towards the pace that they've been asked for.
Well, we took a quick look at a couple of the Japanese runners. They're over 2:10, both of them, so they're not expected to feature amongst these guys, certainly not at the end of the race anyway. But we just saw Igarashi and Morihashi there. Morihashi's a 2:14 guy, and Igarashi 2:15.
Just in the black vest in the middle of that pack. Watch out for Moller. He's actually making his debut here over the marathon distance. Does have very good credentials on the track, a 12:59 personal best over 5,000 meters set in Brussels just last year, 61:54 to win the Riyadh half and pick up quite a big jackpot last year, 60:34 personal best. So he has those credentials to run a good marathon. We'll see what he's capable of. Dubai is known for fast debut performances.
Indeed, we've had more than a couple of debut winners here in Dubai in very fast times, as Paula indicated. Prize money this year, incidentally, for both men and women's winners, $100,000. So not quite as much as Moller won in Riyadh for that half marathon.
No, not quite as much. I think it has been halved actually this year, but still a big prize jackpot. And more than that, I think there's a lot of pride on the line. The Ethiopian athletes as well tend to use this race as a kind of unofficial trial for those World Championships later in the year. Certainly they think if they post a good time here, that puts them high in the pecking order for selection if they want to run in those championships.
Just another word about Moller, incidentally. He was an excellent track athlete, 5,000 meters Ethiopian champion 4 times. And that's an Ethiopian contingent that tends to come here at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, expecting yet another Ethiopian victory. And they may not be far wrong in the men's race, but maybe not in the women's. You'll be seeing a lot more of them at the finish line. Back to the two Japanese, and we've gone through 3 kilometers now, as you can see, 12:59. So just underneath the average 3 minutes per K.
روح أسرع أنا على الهواء.
Well, Igarashi's already got a good sweat on, despite the fact it's only 3K into the race at 17 degrees.
Well, I think maybe reflecting the fact that the humidity is fairly high at the start, 65%. I think it will drop off, certainly when the sun comes up and as the race wears on. Not too much sweating going on in this leading group so far, though. I think it's fairly comfortable for these guys, just settling in behind the pacemakers, letting the pacemakers do their job, and nothing too crazy in the first half, which is good to see. I firmly believe that negative splits in a marathon, even one where the sun's up in the second half, is an easier way to run a quicker time, and I'd rather see them sit back a little bit in the first half and then finish faster.
Well, certainly very quick first halves result in a battlefield at the end, with people dropping like flies off the pace, if not onto the tarmac itself.
Yeah, I think for a long time there was that belief that get to the first half, through the first half as fast as you can and try and hold on for the second half. And then Eliud Kipchoge again with that, when he clocked that amazing 2:01:39, did run negative splits in Berlin that day and was picking up the pace almost kilometre by kilometre in the final 10 kilometres to smash that world record and maybe put it a little bit out of reach for a little while now. So we're going to maybe see guys racing after course records and personal bests a little bit more, and certainly taking a leaf from his book and aiming for negative splits.
Well, as we look at the two Japanese again, talking about records out of reach, she probably won't say, but I shall. Paula Radcliffe's world record of 2:15:25, unlikely to be challenged for some time to come, I think, Paula.
Well, I think records are always there to be challenged, and it can go at any time, but not much I can do about it now. Certainly can't get back out there and get it back again.
It's very smooth and steady. Very nice.
Well, you can hear the Japanese coach on a motorbike quite clearly beside them, just letting them know that they're on the sort of pace that he and they are looking for.
They only have themselves for company out there just through the 4 kilometre marker. In the background behind, I think we'll find that's the lead women's group. So they are on a pretty swift pace if we're guessing that these guys are onto personal best pace around that 2:14 mark. Then the women's pack behind is also on a very quick pace.
Past 4 kilometres now, as you can see, and that pace again, as in the second kilometre, has picked up slightly. But the 5Ks will give us a much clearer idea of what we're going to expect at the end. Well, we were here commentating last year, Paul, and we were freezing cold. And it's we are in the open air, incidentally, folks, overlooking the finish line, and it's not bad at all this morning. There's barely a breath of wind, as Paul has told you earlier, just 4 kilometres an hour, which is hardly anything. And everyone who is supposed to be there is there at the moment, and so are they.
And the drums are banging, they're warming up, ready to really come alive when the athletes turn up to this home straight. But they get here very early, as Pat said earlier, warm themselves up, give a big cheer to the athletes as they run down to the start. And I think the Ethiopian athletes have become very accustomed to getting that support wherever they go and race around the globe.
Well, a lot of Ethiopian guest workers here in Dubai and here in the Gulf. It's not so far to get over to East Africa from here, of course. So a relatively short hop for the Kenyans and Ethiopians, in contrast to the long trips they have to make to the likes of London, New York, Chicago, Boston, Tokyo, etc.
There we go, 14:40 through the first 5 kilometers. Felix Kipkoech there doing a great job leading the pacemakers through fairly smooth. There's been a little bit of up and down in the pace, but generally fairly smooth, and the athletes move across to get their personal drinks. I think that is at the first personal drink station.
Well, just to give you an idea, last year the first 5K was 14:32, so they're a few seconds outside what was last year's course record pace. But as Paula indicated, that could really pick up in the second half if these guys run fairly coolly in the first half and then turn it on in the second. And the fact there's a lot of people around is going to be great for the competition.
Yes, it absolutely will. We can see the size of that first group there.
Marathon is for all age groups, you know, all genders. It's just it's perfect for all, you know. And Dubai is as a city has that as well, you know. It mirrors Dubai as a city, and we had something like 145 nationalities running last year, and you know, majority coming from outside, you know, so it's fantastic, you know. It's a multicultural, it's bringing everyone together, and through sport, and everyone can run, you know. I think we have about 25 men, we've got 11 women, but the quality is there at the top end. I think all the women, most have run under around 226, 228. The men all sub 210, of course, but we've got a 203, 204 with Guya Dolia, Lemmy Berhanu, our past winner. So there's a solid group there, and who knows, course record could be under pressure. So the weather was nice this morning, so we'll wait and see, you know. But that's our target. We want to beat the course record.
Well, as you saw there, that was race founder and director Peter Connaughton, a Dublin man originally, who's lived in the Gulf here for over 25 years and started this race in the year 2000. And Marcel Hug still hanging in there, Paula.
Yep, he absolutely is, and it looks like a very quick pace, just the two of them still, and they've pretty much got the road to themselves. Just a quick update on the women in the race so far. They went through 5K in 16:16, so that's very quick pace, well under 2:20 predicted finish time. Currently 2:17:12.
Yeah, we're turning now, guys. If someone hears me on the comms, we're turning. Oscar,
so now they're coming up. I think they must be coming up to around the first hairpin turn on this course. It's around about 6 kilometers, which must be about where they are now. It's just over 6K, maybe 6.5K. So they'll turn sharp, almost 360 turn, and back down the road. They'll
Well,
get a
they're
chance.
on, sorry, Paul. They're on Al Sufu at the moment. They've gone through the past Dubai College, the Internet City, the Media City. Of course, when you build a new city, you can put places like all the media people in one place, and all the internet people in one place. That's exactly what's happened here in the ultra-modern city of Dubai, which has changed so much over the 20 years that I've been coming out here to see this race. Hardly any of these buildings were here 20 years ago.
No, it does seem like they're building on every spare spot and all the time here, constant changes to the skyline and to the scenery. And the athletes here, when they make that hairpin turn, will take advantage of the fact that they can see what's happening in the race behind them as they head back down. So they will have noted those gaps back to the second group, back to the two Japanese athletes that we just saw running through. And there is the lead car on the other side of the road, I guess, leading the elite women's pack. So not too large a gap yet at this stage in the race, but that will continue to grow as they push on at their sub 3 minute per kilometre clocking, and the women have settled around about that 3:17 mark.
Well, they're heading now to the famous Burj Al Arab, the only 7-star hotel in the world. But passing another interesting development, the Palm Jumeirah. This is Jumeirah Beach, along which they're running at the moment, and they're going to be hitting Jumeirah Beach Road after they go through a small chicane past the that famous hotel, and that's going to be about in another 5 kilometers time. And then on to they do 2 laps around the Jumeirah Beach, so so a couple more hairpins to come before they set off back to the finish in about an hour and a half's time.
Just on the back of that group, I'm looking at Lemi Bahanu, who's chosen to wear a t-shirt this morning, but he's the only one who seems to be struggling to stay with this group. He's just hanging on the back alongside Mengstu, but Mengstu, in contrast, looks more comfortable.
Well, I hope we're going to have time to see that second group at some point, Paula, because Abraham Tedessi is a fascinating character. Paula talked about him earlier, hoping to set a European record. He is 36 years old, and you might think that that might be a bit too old to start looking at records. But remember, Carlos Lopes of Portugal won the '84 Olympic Marathon in Los Angeles when he was 37, and an old pal of yours and rival, Constantina Dieter, Paula, won the Beijing Olympic Marathon when she was 38.
She did indeed. So yeah, I mean, I think marathon running, certainly as you get older, you mature in terms of strength, in terms of temperament too, and in terms of learning the marathon distance. Maybe you do lose a little bit of speed, not too important that over the marathon distance. And I think the thing with Tadesse Abraham is the fact that when he came over to run that World Cross Country in 2004, he then fled his native Eritrea, and he was able to apply for Swiss citizenship. It took him a long time to get that, so he did sit out from racing a little bit, and that can be important too. What I was just pausing for then was to try and work out what the athlete was doing. He seemed to be motioning to somebody running alongside the side of the road. I don't know whether he wanted some information on the pace or whether he'd missed maybe a drinks bottle.
Well, all of the favourites from East Africa are in that leading group, led by the 3 Kenyan pacemakers. And there, right in the middle, Ruth Chepngetich, the Kenyan, who's got a real posse of Ethiopians on her tail. She does have a fellow Kenyan in there in Sharon Cherop, but I think Cherop is not running as well as she was half a dozen years ago, and is not currently in the same sort of class, certainly as Chepngetich and some of the Ethiopian rivals.
Yeah, indeed. I don't see Sharon Cherop in that pack there. She's the bronze medalist from Daegu World Championships back in 2011, but she hasn't gone with that lead group. It's probably sensibly, since they're running along a 2:17 pace here, and you can see Chepngetich, she's almost urging the pacemakers to get on with it. Sometimes you have to do a bit of work yourself though, and she's quite happy to sit in the front of that group there and keep the pace moving along. That's Rama Tusa. We talked about the fact that she finished 5th in New York only a couple of months ago, so she's also had a very quick turnaround from her last marathon. Worknesh de Gever there on the far side, smaller figure. She knows this course very well. She's in fact only run marathons here in the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon, as she won a first attempt, her debut attempt in 2017, ran a personal best last year, but was only good enough for 4th. So she's keeping her powder dry and certainly tracking Ruth Chepngetich, the favourite at this point.
Well, it's very interesting to see that she's right up there between the pacemakers, and I can recall you saying when you set your world record you were a bit affronted that you were asked to have pacemakers.
I think it was more the fact that they didn't think I could run the pace without the male pacemakers, and I was maybe aware of the fact that would generate a little bit of controversy, certainly in the London Marathon. So I would try to run alongside them as much as possible and make it more of a race.
Which is what Ruth Chepngetich is doing this morning, running right in the middle of those guys rather than following them.
Yep, and urging them along. In contrast, here in the men's race, we've got the wall of pacemakers at the front. Kip Koech, Kipchumba Kipruto, all Kenyan pacemakers for essentially Ethiopian athletes behind them. Now it's Gezahane who seems to be the one hanging on and bringing up the rear of this pack. We've got Tashome in front of him, and Lemi Bahanu recovered a little bit from earlier and starting to look better maybe as the race goes on. He certainly has very good credentials coming into the race. Nagasa there. Molla very composed on his debut. And still it is Giadola who's really controlling the races in this pack, sitting there behind the pacemakers and urging them on.
Just to give you an idea of some of the leaders in the men's pack, we mentioned Adola several times, 2:03.46. Tedessa's Europe, well, his best time 2:06.40, and he's going for Mo Farah's 2:05.11. Well, we'll come back to that. We're back here with Chepngetich.
Yep, still urging them on. They did actually pick it up 3:11 through that 7th kilometre. So that's why she's at the front. She's pushing it on. Is that a sensible and smart thing to do at this point? I guess we'll see that unfold later in the race. But certainly the pace is rolling along, and you can see the women behind have kind of committed to now. Makashi has committed to this group. Behind her, there's a wide open stretch of road. So if they do decide to back off, if they do decide the pace is a little bit too hot for this stage in the race, they will find themselves running on their own.
Well, she did say that she thought 50 days was ample time after her previous marathon, but I mean, November the 11th she ran that 2:18.35 in Istanbul. I mean, is that the sort of thing that you might have done? You certainly didn't, did you?
No, I wouldn't have done that unless it was a race that didn't go according to plan, and then I might come back later to race another one. But in one that had gone well, where I'd run a personal best, I would have taken a lot of time to rest and recover before starting the next batch of training. But each to their own, and everybody knows what works best for them.
Well, she's tried that in the past, albeit in half marathons. For example, in 2017, she ran and won 3 half marathons inside 2 months: Paris, Milan, and Istanbul. So she's obviously used to, high velocity training and racing.
Yeah, a little bit easier to race back to back in the half marathon than the marathon, though.
I'll take your word for it. Back with the men, I just want to give you some more of those, their personal bests. Almireu, for example, 2:08. Bahanu Lemi, who was dropping off the pace but looks a bit better now. He was first in Dubai, incidentally, 4 years ago in 2015. He got a best time of 2:05.28. Saboka Dibaba 2:06.17. No relation to the famous Dibaba sisters, Paula.
No relation to Mara Dibaba either, I think.
Gezahegna, who we thought was suffering slightly, he's a 2:05.56 man. Mengstu 2:04.06, and he was only 4th in Dubai with that time. He was 31 just 3 days ago. Molla's a debutant, as Paula said, with high hopes of doing the same as he did in Riyadh last year, winning the race, albeit a half marathon and a marathon. Manuel Saina 2:05.21. Takeli 2:08, Tamru 2:08. So a real high-class field here. A lot of guys on 2:04, 2:05, 2:06, 2:08. And in fact, I think Dubai, Paula, has got the record of most finishes under 2:05 and 2:06 in the past. Well, certainly 7 last year, as you were saying. Extraordinary.
Yep, very strong strength in depth, and that is reflected in the fact that so many athletes come here expecting to run those fast times through the 10 kilometers there in 29:11 for the men's race. So maintaining the pace that they had through the first kilometers, slightly picked up. just for comparison, the Eliud Kipchoge split through 10 kilometers on his world record was 29:01, so they're only 10 seconds behind that at the moment. And that's maybe indicating why the pace is, or the group is starting to break up a little bit, although some of that is while they take the time to locate their personal drinks bottles and make sure that they get those early fluids on board in this race.
Well, Chepngetich still cutting out the pace in the middle of the pacemakers, if you like, and a couple of North Africans by the look of it at the just the head of that women's lead group. Did you get many guys trying to hang on to your coattails, Paula?
I think when I ran in Chicago was pretty much the only time I ran in a mixed race, and other than maybe Berlin, and so when I ran in Chicago, there were a group of athletes around me. Some of them were minders, as they called them, to stop you getting bashed around or knocked around too much by the men in the race. I've never found that they actually did that. I think that we more just formed a racing group together. I actually met one of the guys, Paul Freary, who ran with me in Chicago just last week at the National Running Show in Birmingham, and he was reminding me of the fact that I made him go through halfway too fast. I said, I didn't make him do anything. He just ran with the group.
Well, if you run with Paula Radcliffe, you're running pretty fast, as far as I'm concerned.
But it still is Chepngetich. They're very keen to keep this pace moving along at the very fast pace. De Geefer pretty much matching her stride for stride, and that's Edessa, who sat in just behind her.
So still a tight-knit women's group, as in fact there is in the men's race, but not quite so many women in contention at the moment.
But some of these women, as in the men's race, are somewhat overcommitting to the race at this point. If you look at their personal bests on paper, just looking at Workanesh Shadesa, who is sat in that group there, she has a personal best of 2:24.04, and she's currently running at 2:17 pace. So committing early in this race, whether they'll be able to maintain that, we will see as the race unfolds.
Well, we're shortly coming up to the 10K marker in the women's race too, so we'll be seeing just how well they're doing. So 32:23, Paula?
Yeah, very quick pace. As we said, I think if we check that, it's going to be 2:17 low, maybe sneaking into the 2:16s predicted pace for that split.
So very, very fast in the women's race. Certainly as far as the course record is concerned, 2:19.11 last year. There's a look at the men's times. As you can say, big group together there at men's at 10K. So still a dozen men in contention in the men's race. You've got the pacemakers up there at the head of the field, incidentally. So all the action is in the middle numbers there, or is it certainly going to be? Okay, we're going to look at the local standard chartered head, Rola Abu Mane.
Standard Chartered sponsors 9 marathons globally across the Africa, Middle East and Asia. And it is a part of our Here for Good commitment to the region. It is also our commitment to the communities we operate in, and bringing the people in the same community to work to join with us on the race, as well as inspiring their life-health balance. At the same time, it's a chance for our staff to basically join the race, and they do some volunteering. So really, it's a race for everyone.
So back to the men's wheelchair, and it looks as if there's a big breakaway on here finally, Paula.
Yes, Marcel Hoog out all on its own, it seems. We might get a look back down the road behind him just to see how close his competition, but it looks like his biggest danger is from the car stopped in front of him on the course there, and he's well into the closing stages of his race. Certainly he must be through halfway, well into the second half, and yes, it looks like he's completely on his own at this stage with only open road ahead of him and a few cars to negotiate.
Well, I suppose as a Swiss he ought to be used to slaloming, and he's been out there now for coming up to 40 minutes, so yeah, well on the way to the halfway marker. The men in contrast at 35 minutes are probably about 12, yeah, just over 12k.
Good guess there, Pat. They're actually on predicted pace of 2:03.20, so predicted course record at this stage. Of course, we see that every year in Dubai when they go out at the very fast pace, and then the interesting thing is how well they maintain that through the second half of the race.
Well, one of the old adages is that the marathon race starts at 35k, so we've still got a fair way to go until that marker comes up.
Try and stick on this side up here so we have the hotel on the background, yeah? Right.
Well, as you can see, the Burj Al Arab is looming up in the background. They're still on Al Sufa, heading towards Jumeirah Beach Road.
We're too far, we're too far. Slow down a little bit.
Not quite as spectacular as during the daytime.
Okay, okay, okay.
What a nice backdrop for the 13-14 kilometer mark in this 20th running of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon.
Yeah, in those 20 years, I think we have seen a lot of changes. We've seen the race grow and grow each year. We've seen the city grow and grow. And then we saw Rula Abu Mane there talking. She's the first female financial sector CEO of the area, inspiring a lot of women to get out. She will be herself taking part in the 4 kilometers later this morning and trying to get people active all across this region.
Well, when the race began back in the year 2000, there were only 249 marathon runners. This year there's going to be close to 3,000, I would think. I suspect a lot of people get put off. They think it's going to be too hot down here.
Yeah, and if you're watching and you're worrying about that, then the 6 a.m. start and the timing of the race in the calendar in the year certainly puts paid to that. And it's pretty good conditions. And I think a lot of athletes, that reputation is certainly growing across the fun runners as well, across the region, to come to Dubai for that fast, flat course, good conditions. You won't have to run in direct sunlight for much of the race, and you are capable of running some very fast times.
Well, in contrast, we're going to be having close to 15,000 runners in the 10K, which should just about be starting before we go off air this morning, and in fact before the prize giving. But back to Ruth Chepngetich, still at the head of the women's race. Looks to be thinning out a bit here, Paula. De Geffer is still right on her shoulder.
Yeah, I think we do still have the same women in there. I'm just having a look behind. We've still got Workness Adesa there. Rama Tusa it is, who's just starting to fall back off this pace. As I said, she did run very well in New York not too long ago, and her personal best is not in the 2:17 range, so she's had overcommitted a little bit in the beginning, early stages of this race, and looks as though she's starting to pay the price for that now. Loetigan is still there in the back, and as is Makashi.
Well, you saw a race prediction time of under 2 hours 17. Of course, that's not necessarily going to be the case as they get to the closing stages, but That 2:18:35 shot Chepngetich up to number 7 all time in the World Women's Marathon lists, and that would shoot her up to 2nd if she could do that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would certainly put her up very high. I think the 2nd all-time is that 2:17:01 for Mary Keitany, but they maintain 3:15 kilometers, then that's quick pace. Just for a rough rule of thumb, 3:20 is 2:20 pace.
Well, apart from Chepngetich, who's obviously running extraordinarily well at the moment, I mean, how would you evaluate the women in the marathon world at the moment?
I think we're seeing some exciting races being set up for the year ahead. I think Mary Keitany has shown that she's not afraid to go out and attack, sometimes a little bit too hard in the early stages of the race, but certainly not afraid to lay it all out there. Vivian Chariot, on the other hand, comes at it from a maybe slightly wiser, slightly more sedate viewpoint. She likes to do all of her running in the second half of the race and kind of let the race play out in the first half and then stamp her authority on the field.
Well, that longer shot permitted us to get a better view of the famous Burj Al Arab, and the athletes, well, the men certainly are passing in front of it right now. Well, Molla, to his credit, wore a black vest, so at least we can tell him from a distance. That's the race debutante, or debutant rather. A very, very good track runner, a sub-13-minute 5,000 meters runner last summer, and turned that to his advantage when he won that Riyadh half marathon later on in the year. And this is his debut marathon. Great things expected from him. Well, one of your favourites, Saina, seems to be going pretty well.
Yes, he does. He's pushing on now at the front. He's replaced Adola for the first time, has dropped back from that lead row of races in this pack, and it's now Emmanuel Saina running alongside Tamru at the front. Tamru has a personal best of 2:08:50, so he's certainly running well above personal best pace at this point. Emmanuel Saina, of course, clocked that 2:05 low, clocking in Buenos Aires last year to shock the world, really, and to kind of signal his arrival on the scene of marathon running.
Saina, of course, a Kenyan amongst a host of Ethiopians here, like Chepngetich amongst a host of Ethiopian in the women's race. And that 2:05:21 by Saina is the fastest time ever recorded in South America. So advances being made across the board and across the world in marathon running. And top of the shop, of course, being that fantastic world record by Eliud Kipchoge in Berlin.
Yep, Saina last year actually only raced another 2 times with a 62:03 half in Morocco and a 30:07 10K. You might say that's not very quick, but it was at altitude in the Rift Valley in Kenya. They were his only other races, and then came out and ran that 2:05:21 in Buenos Aires.
Well, it looks like one of the pacemakers is helping a couple of the general race entrants along here, just ahead of the women's group, leading group.
On air.
43:47 for men at 15K, Paula.
Yep, still clipping along, dropping back a little bit in pace as it unpredicted pace to around 3.5, but still on course record predictions at the moment, and still a big healthy number in that pack.
Okay, still on air. Still on air.
Dawn gradually breaking over Dubai as the men head well into their 16th K. And Ruth Chepngetich still firmly in the lead in the women's race, and there is the Burj Al Arab as we take a look at the well, 10 to a dozen men on 43, 47, 48 after 15k in the men's race. Coming up is Saeed Hareb from he's the General Secretary of the Dubai Sports Council.
Of course, we are proud. First, 20th. Second, this marathon is become bigger and bigger. See where we are before 20. We are 500. Today, we try to reach to 36,000. And if you see the international athlete is participating, and still they are challenged for world record here in Dubai. And this is becoming one important marathon in the world. And definitely with what we have it now, I can say the history start in Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon become in the history, and definitely one day we become one of the best and the top marathon in the world. Because Dubai is a brand. Dubai is the destination for all continental. Dubai is easy to approach. Dubai is the base and the hub for all the sport. Definitely, this is one of the more gold hub for this marathon.
Saeed Hareb there, the General Secretary of the Dubai Sports Council. He mentioned over 30,000 people. That, of course, is across all of the races that are going to be here today. The marathon, the 10k, the 4k, and there's a relay too. As we go back to Ruth Chepngetich, still looking very comfortable between those two male pacemakers at the head of the women's race. But former winner De Geefer, and as Paula said, she's only run the Dubai Marathon. Been second and first. This is her third marathon. It's her third time in Dubai. Odessa tight in behind her. And they're all looking fairly comfortable with what is nevertheless an elevated pace.
Yes, it is. You can see Chepngetich very focused on it. She's arms high, looking just down the road ahead of her and maintaining the pace here. She is the one urging the two pacemakers either side to keep the pace going. De Geefer used to going out at this pace. I think they went out not quite so fast last year, but still at a fast pace. And she went with that, was in it right until the closing stages when she just dropped off and wasn't able to stay with Rosa Dereja at the end of the race last year, but still finished fourth and still in a sub 2:20 clocking.
Chepngetich, incidentally, just 22 years old. And doesn't appear to have done any track running, Paula. I mean, that's a relatively recent phenomenon, isn't it? I mean, you did a whole lifetime on the track before you switched to marathons, but many people don't do nowadays. Is it simply that there's not the opportunity to earn well on the track? There's just too many people in contention, so they go straight to the marathon, a lot of runners?
Well, I think that, and more that there is a greater earning potential on the roads and in the marathons. Certainly, I think that's the thinking behind a lot of the Kenyan athletes, the Ethiopian athletes, going straight to the road, straight to the marathon scene early. And I think you have probably a finite number of marathons in your career, but that it just depends on when you start them. So if you start racing them in the 20s, I don't think we're going to see you still racing when you're kind of 36, 37, whereas if you come to the marathon later, you might see that. So it looks as though we're whittling the women's group down. Now you can see Makasha has dropped off the back of that group. Ramatusa went a little while ago, so now we're down to three women in that pack. Chepngetich took a little bit of time to locate her bottle there. She maybe was caught a little bit unawares by the drinks tables coming up on them and wasn't prepared for that. De Geefer got hers safely, and it's Odessa who's also hanging in that group at the moment.
Now that happens so frequently, it's almost like a race tactic, isn't it? So, I know where my drink is, so this is where I'm going to grab it and get away.
Well, I think people tend to be under that misconception that in the marathon there's not that much to think about and you don't really have to focus on too much. You do. You have to be very focused on what's happening around you, what your rivals are up to, how you're feeling and how you're sticking to your race plan, but also be aware of when the drinks tables are coming up, be aware of where your bottle is on that table, which side of the road it's on, and make sure they are all given maps at the technical meeting to show them where their bottles will be located on which table or which position on that table. So they should have practiced that, they should have run through it in their minds certainly beforehand.
Well, as we come back to the men, remember the 3:11 that kilometre for the women's leading group, so they're certainly not relenting in their pace.
And reasonably consistent for the men's race there too. The slowest kilometre of the race has actually been the first kilometre, just taking a little bit of time to get into it, which is wise, and then consistently around that kind of 2:55 to 2:59 pace, with the exception of the 15th kilometre, which was maybe a little bit quick.
Well, in another 5K we'll have the half marathon time up, and then we'll have a really good idea of where this race might be heading, certainly time-wise, unless there's a real collapse in the final stages, but at least one person always comes through. And here at the start line, the Ethiopians are massing even more, or rather the finish line nowadays.
Yeah, and a healthy presence in that lead group. Not too many people have dropped off the back. It's now Guiadola who's gradually drifted back in that pack and is now bringing up the rear alongside Tashome. And Tamru's still at the front, keeping that pace, pushing along. Emmanuel Saina still in there, Takela on the far side. Mengstu's still in there looking strong as well.
Well, looking through the race stats, Paul, you see a lot of guys who tend to finish first, second, third in races, and a lot of guys who finish 7, 8, 9, 10. Do you think that's the difference between people who expect to do well and people who hope to do well?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people come certainly to this race knowing that they're in shape, and I think the biggest factor when you're coming into a marathon is you can't kid yourself in a marathon. You have to have done the training, you have to know that you're in shape. You might be able to talk a big talk before the race, but the minute the racing gets underway, if you haven't done that preparation, it quickly becomes evident, and if you overcommit in the first part of the race, you will also pay the price for that. So I think the confident runners in there, the people who are really up there pushing the pace, like Chepngetich, like Saina, in there today, they are the ones who know that they've prepared well and know that they're in good shape for this race, rather than just turning up and hoping that you're going to be able to pull a good race out of the bag. You're less likely to be able to do that over the marathon than any other distance.
Well, it sort of reminds me of my school teachers eons ago, which was you can't do badly in all your exams up till the final one and expect to do well in the last one. So get to work. Well, there's Marcel Hug, and daylight has really broken now, and he's broken away and looks to be well on the way to a repeat victory here in the wheelchair race.
Yeah, he's probably only got less than half an hour of pushing left in this race. Well clear, negotiates the speed bump there, and the silver bullet looks as though he's on his way to defend his title from last year.
Well, the Japanese were expected to push him towards the victory this year, but they disappeared well before halfway, and it's Hug in splendid isolation, as he so frequently is, and he certainly was last year, and a repeat performance this year for the Swiss. So down to 3 women by the looks of it, Paula.
Yep, 3 women and 3 male athletes running alongside them, so pretty evenly balanced there, and still no change. It's Ruth Chepngetich who's keeping that pace, pushing on, and Worknesh Degefa maybe looking the more comfortable of the two. Her and Worknesh Adesa sat behind.
We've not said much about Odessa. She's only got one marathon to her credit, and that was in China, in Xiamen, a couple of years ago. That's a 2:24:04. That race is run round about the same time as this race. It's a port city just to the north of Hong Kong, and it tends to be one of the earliest races in the year. So a couple of years since she did 2:24:04, but that would be in for revision if she could hang on to this pace.
Yeah, she did run a 2:26 in China, in Hengshui in 2018, and won the Marrakesh Marathon back in 2015. So a little bit of experience there, but certainly on pace at the moment for a big personal best if she manages to maintain this pace.
Well, that trio appears to be well clear of any pursuers at the moment, and the marathon is such that it's not like cycling. Nobody could come back from a gap like that in a foot race.
Well, certainly not when they've committed to going with the fast pace and then have drifted back off the back as well. And then I think when you go out at that faster pace, when you're capable of running around the 2:25s, then it's less a case of drifting off the back rather than really falling with a big bang off the back of that pace. And so I don't think we'll see anybody come through that has originally been in that pack. If anybody makes the ground up now, it will be somebody who's run a much more even pace from the beginning.
Just a couple of kilometers away from the halfway, and is that Adola who is sort of clinging on just behind Moller at the moment?
I think it was Lemi Bahana who was racing in the t-shirt. It's hard to see unless we get a little bit closer because of all the similar coloured vests in there.
Anyway, a big men's pack still as we come up towards the halfway marker in about 7 or 8 minutes.
It is Lemi Bahanu. There's Adola is sitting on the shoulder of Kipruto, so he's moved back up alongside Emmanuel Sainer.
Well, we're getting ready for the start of the mass marathon. They go off an hour behind the elites. So they get to run in daytime, but they also have the disadvantage of the warmer temperatures. But I don't think it's going to get much warmer today, Paula. It's overcast here, unusually so. And in fact, the local media have been complaining about how cold it is. I mean, if it's 21 degrees here, they think it's cold. So think about that wherever you are in the world experiencing sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah, they're in the middle of a terrible cold snap here in Dubai. Good conditions for marathon running, though, pretty much perfect for if they could have picked a temperature for this race today. I think this is pretty good. No direct sun, haze and a little bit of cloud almost as they're running this morning. So as the daylight comes up, there's no direct sun to put a disadvantage on this pace at the moment.
And that's certainly happened in the past here. I mean, Haile Gebrselassie came 3 times to the Dubai Marathon. And on one occasion, this was when the start was at 7 o'clock in the morning. On one of those occasions, the sun got so hot after 8 o'clock at halfway, it virtually ruined what was effectively a world record attempt and had been up to the halfway. So excellent conditions here in this 20th running of the Dubai Marathon, sponsored by Standard Chartered. And there is the 20K time, 58:31.
Yeah, we have traffic.
Now that's just 4 seconds behind last year's time when the record of 2:04 was set. But obviously there's a long way to go in the race. And there we have the different groups separated into to time lots, what they're expected to do. This is the mass marathon coming up to the start line. Now this would be a fun run for you, wouldn't it? But I doubt you'd be running a marathon nowadays. What, 10Ks and things like that you stick to?
I think 10K is more my level at the moment. It's just fun to get out there and just be amongst all of the runners and sharing the atmosphere. And I think that's what so many people are going to enjoy today, is being part of that family of runners, that family of marathon runners, 10K runners. And when you go through a bad patch, as you inevitably do in any marathon, then it's generally the runners around you who will help you get through that.
Well, it's the same course, and off they go. About 400 to 500 meters up to the first turn along Al Sufa, and then exactly what the elite racers are doing right now.
Do this! In a couple of hours. All the very best, good luck, and good running.
Well, there's probably already a couple of thousand people cross the start line there. Back in the year 2000, there were just over 1,000 people in the 10K. It's always been a feature of race day here at the Dubai Marathon, as has been the fun run. It's either been 3K or 4K. 4K currently. Around about 15,000 people expected to set out on the streets of Dubai this morning.
Pretty much every nationality represented out there today, which again, great example of the diversity of marathon running, the way that it brings together people. Dubai, very, very mixed community here. A lot of people come and work from all over the world and want to get out there and race. Incidentally, I think the Ethiopian contingent have got a lot to cheer in this race, but also in the 10K coming up as well. Apparently a lot of Ethiopian runners who live and work here in Dubai out there racing, and they'll get that equal support from the Ethiopian drums banging later on.
Well, let's see how the Ethiopian workers do here out on the course today. Again, in the year 2000, there were 70 nationalities represented, and that has more than doubled today, or rather last year there were 147 countries, that's to say, represented in the 15,000 people who are running as they are today. And that view essentially is heading out of town towards Abu Dhabi. And we're going to be going back to the elite race, homing in on the half marathon. Well, in last year's time of 2:04, the new course record, the halfway time was 1:01:38.
I think we can hope that they have gone through halfway at this point. We just missed that split, so we'll try and get that to you as soon as we can. I haven't seen it flash up on the screen, and unfortunately our internet has gone down, so we've got no backup splits at the moment. But through that pace was maintained through 21 kilometers, so I think it's safe to say it would have been somewhere around that pace and still on that predicted 2:04, sub 2:04 clocking.
So around about 61:40 for the half marathon, and this of course is when a marathon race begins to get interesting. There are a couple of guys clinging on to the back of this dozen or so elite in the men's race, but still a solid trio of women. Chepengeti Chidesa and De Geffer.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? The women's pack have increased their pace, or the Turkish male athlete there who was ahead of them has dropped his because he has been reeled in and is now taking advantage of the women's pacemaking and sitting in on the back of that pack.
And there we go at 20k, 64.35 for Ruth Chepngetich, but closely followed by De Geffer and Edessa. And here we seem to have got, she's got another problem again with her drinks. Well, she certainly needs to be brushing this one up.
I think it seems like she loses concentration and hasn't yet got drilled into her memory that those drink stations do come up on the left-hand side every 5 kilometers. So the minute you go through each of the 5 kilometer splits, you need to be getting yourself in position and ready to find the right table and find the right drink. Seems like she didn't get the right bottle there. She had some water and didn't like that one, and so she's switched it with a pacemaker and taken a water from Hailu.
Well, this is after all only her fourth marathon. She won Istanbul in 2017. And of course set that wonderful time to 18:35 in Istanbul in November, mid-November. But earlier on in the year she'd also run in Paris, where she finished second. Incidentally, trains in the famous Ngong Hills outside Nairobi.
Ngong Hills, of course, known as the region that produced Paul Tergat, so she's in good company training there, and has obviously put in some good training since that Istanbul race, as well as some good recovery, and racing well so far today.
Let's take a look at Marcel Hoog, the Silver Bullet, who's currently leading in the men's wheelchair race.
Winter I had a good winter training. I had a short cold, but now it's good again. I came here about 10 days ago to Dubai for training, for preparation for the marathon, and I feel good. Yeah, it's definitely also it's very tough because there are not so many turns or downhills, uphills. You never can have a break. You always have to push 42k, and it's really tough.
Double Paralympic gold medalist Marcel Hoog from Switzerland, well on the way to a repeat victory here in the 2019 Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. Currently the world #1 on the roads. And those guys that were expected to stay with him at least till halfway didn't quite maintain the pace, so Hoog once again in splendid isolation, heading for victory. Something like 10-12 minutes left in the men's race. Women's race would be coming in round about 1:35, 1 hour 40. But Hoog should be doing under 1 hour 30. There is a guy in this race, Josh Cassidy, who has done 1:18, which is the fastest ever, but it was on the infamous Boston course, which of course is largely, well, not entirely downhill, but it's a gradient course, so that race doesn't count. Well, this gives you a better idea of the pace that the men are doing at the head of the field. Coming up to the 24th kilometre now. And we're not going to be getting any sun. And if we do, it's going to be towards the tail end of the men's race, so that can only be good. Excellent conditions this morning here in Dubai for this 20th running of the Standard Chartered Marathon.
And predicted pace still around about that 2:03:30, 2:03:30, 35 pace. So very much ticking along, moving along, and we're going to see some casualties certainly in this second half. Inevitably happens here in Dubai when everybody commits to that fast early pace, and not everyone of course capable of maintaining it through to the finish, but we still have a lot of the main protagonists in that group and looking comfortable. Emmanuel Sainer's in there, Tamru is still there. I'm looking for Giadola, he was there, I think that's him at the back, just drifted over to the other side of the road. Nagas is in there, Tekele is in there.
Well, we're still on a very fast predicted time here, 2:03:38, but that's just taking, or rather hoping that all these guys can stick together and maintain that rapid early pace. The 25k should give us a better idea. Last year's winner, Mosinet Geremu of Ethiopia, went through in 1:12:57 last year. So in a couple of minutes' time, we should have a clearer idea of the sort of time we might expect this year. I'm not sure Adola is in there, Paula.
Yes,
he
is.
Okay.
He is.
Oh,
He
right,
is there,
yeah,
just
yeah.
hanging on to the back at this stage, but he is still in there, as is Moller, the debutant. Mengstu still in there, who's had a very good race here last year as well. We'll try and bring you some information if we can on how Tadesse Abraham is doing further back down in his European record attempt. He is, of course, in the second group of runners here today.
Well, Tekele is also showing well. We haven't really spoken much about him. He's, well, in theory, only a 2:08:31 runner, which he did in Frankfurt back in 2014. But he's won half a dozen marathons in his career, and that's always a telling factor. The guy is a winner.
And just a quick update on Tadesse Abraham, we have got that. He's slowing down a little bit. He went through halfway in 63:14, so he's slipped off that European record pace, but is still on course for a personal best if he can maintain that.
And despite her mini disasters at the drinks table, she's back where she's been for the majority of this women's race. Ruth Chepngetich between the pacemakers. She's clearly happy with the pace. She's not cajoling them anymore. And look at the time we're expected here. Yet again, of course, in another 10k or so, we'll know whether that's going to be a realistic finishing time. That'd be yet another couple of minutes off her best if she should do that.
Yeah, and certainly the fact that there are 3 women still in there at this pace, that's something that we haven't seen, I don't know if ever, or certainly for a long time here, is women past halfway, running at a 2:16 pace and in a real race there. Yes, they've got pacemakers around them, but it is certainly a race at the moment. Chepngetich looks to be the one pushing on, certainly looks to be the stronger of the 3, but Edesa is really running out of her skin there, as is De Geefer, keeping her eyes focused almost on the heels of Chepngetich and not doing any leading at this point.
Well, there's 25k, 1:13:10. So they're about 13 seconds adrift of Geremu's time last year, but you know, depending on the second half of the race, that's when he did the 2:04 last year. Incidentally, Mosinet Geremu, he went through 25k in 1:12:57, 1:13:10 we have here. And, but still a big group of men, and the longer that they can stay together, they should be able to maintain that reasonably fast pace, which is still theoretically on a course record.
Interesting racing from Guy Adola here. He tends to not content just to sit in any one position. He likes to let the others know that he's still there.
يلا بس ابعد شوي عشان انزل لفت لا العكس.
Let's take a look at Tadesse Abraham, who the Eritrean-born Swiss who Paul has just been talking about.
I have a big goal to do some history in my name. That was, you know, I was immigrant in Switzerland. I'm originally from Eritrea. So in my career, before the finish my career, I love to write any history in my life, and where my son and of course me to discuss with friends after the career. So when I broke the Swiss record in 2016, and I was qualified for Rio, so since then it started my real life to have a dream. And then I went to Rio and I got the diploma, and then what left? European record.
Well, not just an excellent runner, he's something of a linguist, speaks 8 languages, Tadesse Abraham. And he spoke about his wife and child there. He's brought them with him this weekend, but he's not staying at the Athletes Hotel. That's how serious his intent is on trying to get close to that European record that now belongs to Mo Farah, 2:05.11. But a fascinating guy, Tadesse Abraham, back in the second group, currently running round about 2:06.30 pace.
Meanwhile, at the front lead group, the pace is still ticking along very consistently, maintaining that sub 2:04 course record pace that has been set from the beginning. Maybe a little bit safer and smarter than last year in terms of the way that they've attacked it. They haven't gone out quite so fast, but maybe maintaining it a little bit further into the race. Of course, when we get into the final 10K, the real racing will start. We'll see who's really in shape, and indeed that 26th kilometre as I speak just slowed a little bit, tailed back outside to 3:01 for the first time.
Well, they've come back down to their second or third hairpin rather, and you just had a better shot of the face of the famous Burj Al Arab, the 7-star hotel on the seafront here in Dubai. Now, Paul, I mentioned Mo Farah there just a couple of minutes ago. When we talked last year about his transition to being a serious marathon runner, despite the fact that he's coached by your husband Gary Locke, you expressed a few doubts about the possibility that he might make it really to the top of the marathon tree. He's now done 2:05.11, won the Chicago Marathon in Sterling style, looked very easy in doing so. What do you think now?
Well, I think the most impressive thing for me about his race in Chicago was the way that he raced the race, the way that he wasn't afraid to take the race by the scruff of the neck and kind of stamp his authority on it. I think he was the person that everybody looked to, certainly on the track and at 10,000 meters, and maybe he was starting to feel that a little bit, the fact that he was the marked man in that field, and he enjoyed going to the marathon. I think he knuckled down to the training very, very well. He recognized the fact that there were areas that he needed to work on to make it as a marathon runner, and I'm not sure he would say that he's fully made it yet, but he's certainly well on the way, and I think he's making those adjustments very well, and he's feeling a lot more at home racing in the marathon. He knows that he's got a way to go to get onto the shoulder of Eliud Kipchoge, as it were, over the marathon distance, but he's making big strides with every race. So I think looking ahead to the Olympic Games in Tokyo, it's all looking good at this point.
And he's got the opportunity to look over the shoulder of Eliud Kipchoge, because they're both running in London in a couple of months' time.
Yeah, another chance to race well, and I think one thing you can say about Mo Farah's never afraid to step up and race the big guys, race the best guys, and it's one of his big goals, I think, ever since he raced the mini marathon as a kid on the streets of London, that he wants to step up and take that London Marathon victory, following the footsteps of the great marathon runners that we've seen in the past. He's already done that in taking the record from Steve Jones, and I think he would like to take that victory in the London Marathon as well.
Well, back to the men's race here in Dubai. Looks as if we're down to one pacemaker who's still valiantly forging ahead to the 27k mark. But still a decent group of world-class athletes in there. And they're still being stretched out, as you can see. We've lost one or two, and I think that might be Adola off the back.
Yes, that is a little bit of a daylight gap opening up there, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to make that up now. This group is forging ahead. Sainer it is at the front, spearheading that. Mengstu sat in behind him. Tamru's the interesting one, only a 2:08 personal best for him, and all along he has sat comfortably alongside Emmanuel Sainer, just behind the pacemakers in this race, and looks very comfortable still.
Well, we've had lots of surprises here in this Dubai Marathon by dint of virtually unknown winners in the past, most of them from Ethiopia, as we look at the Ethiopian contingent at the finish line just across the street from us. But it's a Kenyan still forging ahead, but two Ethiopians still hanging in there behind her.
Yeah, I think still hanging in definitely for a day, so there's a little bit of a gap starting to break up there, although she benefits again from the fact that Chepngetich was not aware the drink station was coming up, so when she drops back, that certainly seemed to help her day a little bit. She takes a little bit of time to make sure that she gets her bottle, and a quick look at the pace there. It did slow for that last 5 kilometre, but then that's completely understandable given that the previous one had been 16:05, which is very, very fast pace.
Well, we're taking a look at Adola there. I mean, after that terrific 2:03.46 debut 15-16 months ago in Berlin, he had a horrible year last year. He was injured, and then he was sick, well, which really came to a head when he raced in London last year and finished way down. Well, not exactly way down. I think it was 17th, something like that. But far off the performance that he'd set in Berlin, and it looks as if for him this morning, well, certainly to remain in contention is now looking well beyond him.
Yeah, I'm sure he's not going to be the only casualty from this group as well. I think as the pace starts to, even as it maintains here, but if it starts to pick up any, we will see athletes drop off the back. This is where it really starts to tell in the marathon. And if you're not in shape to run at this pace and to react to it now, then it's going to become very, very hard to hang on. And there we see the pace has picked up a little bit, 2:53. For that last kilometre, and that's certainly put paid to Adola's chances in this race. And then it looks like maybe it's Gezahein as well, dropping off the back in the black vest.
So attrition at the as we come up towards the 30k mark. Now, time to look for here in last year's race when the course record was set. 30k arrived in 1:27.38. So we've gone through 28, as you can see there. And the sole pacemaker heading 7 people. Well, Moller still looking good there, taking his cue from the more experienced marathon runners. It is his debut. Excellent track runner. That half marathon that he won in Riyadh wasn't a super fast time, but the conditions must have been fairly warm, I would think.
Yeah, and I think the longer he stays in that lead pack, it's a little bit too early to start talking about the closing stages now at this point. But when you've got a 12:59 5k personal best under your belt, then that's certainly something the other guys are going to get worried about. And if he's still there coming into the last couple of kilometers, then we can expect the others to start trying to wind it up from a long way out to make sure that the sting is taken out of his finish.
Well, Negesa looking very good there. We've not really talked about him very much. 26-year-old Ethiopian. He's a 2:9:14 man, and that was for second in the Hengshui Marathon in China last year. But he's got half a dozen 2:10, 2:11s under his belt, but this really is a step up here.
And he's almost urging the pacemaker to carry on. They can see his eyes focused on the back of the vest of Kipchumba in front. And now, for the first time, is Saina in a little bit of difficulty. He's drifted to the back of this group and his head is starting to lean back just a little bit.
And back to Chepengetic and De Gever, right where she's been for most of the race, on her left shoulder, as if she needed a reminder that she was there. Remember, she's won this race in the past and she's also finished second. It looks like we've lost Odessa, Paula, as you suggested was going to happen.
Yeah, it looks as though one of the male pacemakers is in a little bit of trouble there as well. He's slotting back in behind, but Hailu and Asif now doing a good job of keeping this pace going. Actually, Odessa hasn't dropped too far back. We can just see her there in the background. So not lost a huge amount of ground, but that is going to be difficult to make up unless one of these two ladies falters from this early pace.
Well, Assefa is a 68-minute half marathon man, and of course that's well off a world-class pace. But he's doing a pretty good job here with Hailu. They're certainly operating at around about 2:17 marathon pace at the moment, 2:18 at worst.
Well, no, 2:16:31 is the predicted time, so it's still a very, very fast time. It has slowed a little bit over the last 5 kilometers, but only because they were running at such a quick pace earlier on, and now it's probably a more sensible pace that they're maintaining.
And the sun has actually crept out from behind the clouds. Well, certainly here at the finish line, which is not so far from where these guys are, and women, of course. But it's still staying relatively cool here. No more than 17, 18 degrees. In fact, 17 at the start, and I suspect it hasn't gone up any more than 1 degree Celsius. That's the low 60s Fahrenheit. Moller looking very, very good there, the track runner. Kipchumba doing a good job of pacing here. So it's Mengstu who has finished second in this race, only just beaten out last year. Moller, the debutant, and Negesa, he's running half a dozen minutes better than his personal best so far, and that really would be a step up for him into real world record class.
Yeah, Mengstu's personal best 2:04:06. So of the 3 guys that we see in shot right now, he certainly is the strongest, as Kipchumba chooses this moment to step aside, and Negesa it is who grabs his drink, pushes along. I think he was pushing on just to make sure that he was able to get his drink safely, and now settles back down, and this group has very quickly, it appears, whittled down to a group of 3.
And at 30k, as you can see there, 1:27:43. So they're just 5 seconds off the sort of pace that was run last year when the finishing time was 2:04. Now it depends on what happens in this last few kilometers of the race as to what the sort of finishing time we're going to see are. But they are, well, it says their predicted time 2:03:23. That's over half a minute faster than last year's 2:04 course record. So interesting race in the final stages, certainly in the men's race, Paula.
Yeah, definitely. And Mengstu taking the opportunity just to look around. He's certainly the leader, as it were, in that group now. He's the one giving out the orders, dictating to his compatriots where they should run and maybe should they take their share of the pacemaking. He's got the pace pushing along a little bit. He knows that the group's breaking up behind him, and I'm sure he wants to keep this pace rolling. I'm sure he has that course record in his sights, and he may be aware that Saina is just quickly closing that gap. So he seems to have got a little bit of a second wind maybe as he passed through that feed station there, and he was able to quickly make up a gap that was starting to rapidly grow from fourth. It was 4 seconds maintained, and he just quickly closed that then.
Well, I wish we'd had a longer headshot there to see exactly where he came from, because he really seemed to be dropping off the pace when there were 8 or 9 people still left in the pack. But that's pretty extraordinary at this stage of the race, because these guys are running fast, as you can see. Currently on about 2 hours, 3.5 minutes. And I was about to say, looks like the Ethiopian regime is continuing here, but Edward Saina of Kenya is making his presence felt, and despite that strange drop off of pace there, he looks pretty good now.
He does. Tamru tried to go with him in bridging that gap, and certainly he's partly bridged it. He may be able to yet latch onto the back of that group. So from a big group down to 3 and back to 5 again, it seems.
Well, when the trio of Kenyans was out by themselves, it did seem as if they slowed the pace slightly. It's a bit curious, all of that.
Yeah, Nagasa appeared to be taking the initiative there and marshalling the others into some sort of form to keep the pace moving along when the pacemaker stepped aside, and then Emmanuel Saina, the one who took advantage of that with Tamru to be able to get back into that lead group. So the race is still on here.
Well, those are the official names, incidentally. These are the passport names. You see the Ethiopians have got 3 names, because that's their own name, their father's name, and their grandfather's name in the case of the Ethiopians. A bit like Russians, their patronymics.
And there you can see that indeed that 31st kilometre did slip a little bit, which probably explains the return of Saina to that lead group. But he's gone straight to the front of that group and is now pushing on and asking questions of the others in that group. And for the first time, Molla maybe just sitting back and just watching, just letting it play out in front of him a little bit.
It's setting C, CCU. I'm on setting C.
Well, his carriage and that barrel chest. I don't know if you remember Benson Masia, Paula, from your younger days. He looked like a boxer, Benson did, rather than a runner. Now I think he had been a boxer at one point in his younger days, but Saina with that barrel chest rather reminds me of him. Terrific half marathoner and marathoner, Benson Masia.
And very consistent now in the women's race. They've certainly settled into that 3:17, 3:18, locked into that pace, and still really no change. The pair of them running together amongst the 3 men and maintaining the pace on a very, very quick. So certainly at this stage, both of them on for personal bests, and when their personal bests were already very, very respectable, this is very respectable running out here on the streets of Dubai. So far this morning, I'm just trying to look back down the road to see whether Egesa is still in the back of the shot. I think she is, but that gap is certainly growing.
Well, 2:16:40 predicted race time. Remember the new course record set last year, 2:19:11. So they've got a lot of leeway here. Even if they do slow up, they could still be on for a course record bonus. The men's is slightly more questionable. They're roughly at the same sort of time as last year, although the prediction is for about half a minute faster at the end. And as you can see, it's 4 men, and Tamru is hanging in there about 10-15 meters off the pace, 15-20 meters maybe, with the foreshortening. And that must be such a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I think you've just got to, at that point, just keep your eyes focused on the vests in front of you. Just try and lock into your rhythm and run your race. If you overcommit, that is, if you take a little bit too much out of the tank at this stage in the race, you will not be able to recover from that. So these guys will have practiced it in training. I say many times, it's far better to get it wrong a few times in training than it is to get it wrong in the race. So learn to know where that line is that you're able to maintain of your own pace without stepping over it into dangerous territory where you just won't be able to maintain it to the end.
Well, this is interesting. This is the Turkish guy who was in front of the lead women, then behind them, and this is the pacemaker that dropped off the lead women's pace, and the two Japanese, Igarashi and Morihashi, are with them. And I'm not quite sure if they're behind the women or in front of them.
Well, I think they're in front of the women. It appears to be the chasing group. I think they're in front of the women. They may even be the group chasing through on the men's, although I do think we have the group that contains Tadesse Abrahams somewhere in the middle between them too.
Well, that's Nagase, who separated himself from the other trio, the two of his Ethiopian colleagues, and then Saina of Kenya, who's looking over to try and figure out what's going on. And Tamru is still about, well, probably that's something like 30 meters now. And I think he may be struggling to try and maintain any sort of hold on getting back to that group. And Nagase might have moved across the street just to try and persuade his pursuers that he's going to get away from him, but Saina's not having any of it. It's coming back, it seems, very easily up to his shoulder.
He likes to play the ego games, I think, Saina. He's almost ran alongside Nagase and then looked across at him as if to say, I'm still here, is that the best you've got? Is that all the surge that you could put in, because you didn't do any damage to me there? And Nagase certainly wasn't moving across the road in search of shade. They don't need to do that at the moment. The sun isn't bright enough to cause them any problems there, but he did seem to be breaking away, and Saina went right up alongside him and then has dropped right to the back. So I think we may be seeing his last kind of throwdowns in this race, and he doesn't seem to have any more to give now, and that looks to be almost a significant gap opening up from Nagase back to Molla.
I think he paid for his presumption, and as he dropped back, he took an ostentatious look at his watch, which I think was also a pretense that he wasn't feeling as bad as he clearly is. And here we are back with Chepngetich, and that is De Gever, isn't it? Obscured by one of the pacemakers. So she's still in there. Remember, this is only her third marathon, De Gever. She's only run in Dubai. She's won the race. She's finished second, and here she is, hanging in right behind Ruth Chepngetich, who on paper is a minute and more faster than her.
Yeah, she was talking very, very boldly at the press conference yesterday, De Gever, that she was in very good shape, very confident that she could regain that title that she had won 2 years ago. And through the 30 kilometers there, they are through in 1:37.16, which has slowed a little bit, I think, from the pace that they were on, but still certainly in the 2:17s, if not just under 2:17 predicted finish times. It does look as though the group is slowing now, though, doesn't it? They're kind of looking at each other. The male pacemakers are looking across at each other, but the pace is maintained at 3:17 through that kilometre.
I was trying to see how far back Edessa was. I think she's well off the pace now. So I would suggest at this stage of the game, with 12 kilometres left to run, yeah, she's half a minute down. So the winner's going to be from one or two of these women, a Kenyan or an Ethiopian. And Chepngetich could break that 10-year stretch of Ethiopian wins in the women's race, but it certainly looks as if that 10-year stretch in the men's race is going to be maintained. And at the moment, the man making all the pace is Nagase, who was nowhere near one of the fastest men in the race coming in, but he's the man who's been operating best in the last few kilometers. Nevertheless, Molla the debutant, the terrific 5,000 meters runner, is hanging in on the inside of the road. Well, I certainly think they're going to be happy when they see the men's race trio, or the leading trio, come down the finish line. Maybe not so much when if the two women are still together.
One thing's for sure, I think they will make their presence very, very clear and loudly heard, and they are getting very excited as they're watching the race, of course, unfold on the big screen opposite, as they're seeing Negesa spearhead this Ethiopian attack on the course record. Molla, they're spread out across the road now, aren't they? And there's a little bit of a gap back to Mengstu now, who's maybe struggling to go with the pace being laid down. Not surprising when it's picked up to a 2:51 last kilometre there.
And Saitner looks to be really well off the pace now. He's that's a good 100 metres and more. And Tamru is not all that far behind him. So who knows? Tamru might yet get in the final four. But it's certainly Negesa. I wouldn't eliminate Molla at the moment. He's a race debutant, but he's got terrific track pace, and that may tell in the final kilometres. Just 8K to run now. 42.195, the full distance.
And that is the final of the hairpin bends negotiated for the leaders in this men's race. So their last chance, their last opportunity to look back quickly on the other side of the road and see the damage that they've inflicted on the other racers behind them, and to maybe see any dangers moving through. But I don't think that's going to be the case given the hot early pace in this marathon. I think it's now going to be survival to the end, and it looks as though it's down to two men now fighting this out, as Mengstu, it's not yet an unassailable gap, but he's certainly struggling at this stage to go with the pace being laid down by Negesa and Molla.
Well, he was only beaten in the finishing sprint last year, Mengstu, but he looks to be, well, not well off the pace, but certainly dropping back at the moment. They're heading down the Jumeirah Beach Road for the last time. Round about, just over 7K to run. So the men's race, mano a mano, just two in, and when we last saw it was two women in contention. We got two Ethiopians that head in the men's race, and an Ethiopian and a Kenyan, those great East African neighbours and rivals in the women's race.
Yeah, and apologies we're not able to bring you too much information about the chasing groups in this race. I can tell you that if you're following from Switzerland, you're following the progress of Tadesse Abraham. He went through 30 kilometres in 1:30.50 and now pointing to around about a 2:7.45 finish. So he's running on his own and does appear to be slowing at this stage.
Well, that certainly must place him ahead of the Japanese runners that we saw earlier. So although he's well behind these guys, he should be well ahead of the rest of the field. So certainly a top 10 finish for Tadesse Abraham, because I suspect we've got a few casualties from that fast early pace.
Yeah, I think certainly what we do have is no particular chasing group, as it were, until we get back to the two Japanese runners running together, because the guys are all strung out down the road. They have tried to go with the pace for as long as they could and then have not been able to hang on. And so I think we're seeing people strung out, single file almost, back along the road, probably back until we get to the Japanese group and then to the group that contains the lead women.
Well, this is an interesting 35K time, 1:42.17. Now, last year it was 1:42.34 at this stage, so the men certainly look on course for a course record, and the women certainly were when we last saw them past one of the 5K markers. And they certainly haven't relented substantially, have they?
No, it doesn't look like they've slowed much at all, and they have a big buffer on that course record. At one stage it was almost up to 3 minutes ahead of course record pace. Certainly they're still 2 minutes up on that pace, and so they can afford to slow down and still break that course record. I think they have their eyes set ahead of the course record, to be honest. I think they're firmly focused on running personal bests out there today, and now it becomes also the battle to see who can actually win the race, who can take home that winner's purse and the victory today. And Chepngetich has led the whole way. De Gever has tracked her stride for stride. Can she find something else in the closing stages? We've still got a fair way to go yet, and a lot can happen in the next 10 kilometers or so.
So the 20th running of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. We had 2 course records last year, and it looks like we're headed for 2 new course records today. Men's course record 2:04.0. That was set by Masenat Geremir of Ethiopia last year. Rosa Derecha, also of Ethiopia, ran 2:19.11. Now the 2 women are well under that time at the moment, and it certainly seems at the moment that Nagasa and Moller of Ethiopia are going to be very close, but currently under last year's course record pace.
Now running a little bit companionably side by side, aren't they? They've relaxed a little bit from their opposite side of the road strategy, and Nagasa looked as though he was taking a little bit of a breather, his foot off the gas a little bit, having picked up the pace, looking across and at Moller and just trying to see where they're going to go next.
Well, you may have heard the Ethiopian crowd here not too far away from us shrieking when that information came up on the big screen at the finish line, because they can see that, it's Ethiopia all the way except for one Kenyan, and that is Emmanuel Saina, hanging on at the moment in 4th place, just half a dozen seconds ahead of Tamru, yet another Ethiopian. That's a nice shot of the erect body carriage of these 2 Ethiopians. They're still cutting out a wonderful pace here.
Yeah, Mengstu not out of this yet. He's only a few seconds behind there, and maintaining his position in 3rd place. And if there's any faltering up ahead, I think he will be the one to take advantage of it. Saina looks as though he's in 4th place, but he's drifting back, and he's maybe going to lose that 4th to, is it Tamru closing behind him?
Well, it was Tamru earlier on. I suspect it still is again. He's rocking and rolling a bit, Saina. And with 6-7 kilometers to go, he's going to have to do, everything in his power to stay ahead and keep and maintain this 4th place. There seems to be a substantial distance between 5th and 6th at the moment, well over 100 meters by the looks of it. But here we come up. It is indeed Tamru of Ethiopia, currently in 5th place.
He is on course for a very good personal best still, but whether he can make up any ground on the lead trio now, because Mengstu has indeed closed that gap and closed it considerably and confidently to move alongside Muller, and we're back to 3.
Well, that's fascinating, isn't it? When somebody can pick up, 25, 30 meters at this late stage of a really fast marathon race, you wonder if he's not going to be the surprise winner.
Like pins and needles for 20 minutes.
Well, he certainly got run out of it last year, just in the last few strides, and I'm sure he remembers that.
What do we have left? Like 5 kilometers or something?
And there we can see from those recent split times coming up, that is why Mengstu has closed that gap. The pace slowed to a 3:06 kilometre, then picked up again a little bit to 3:02. But I think all of these men now, understandably, starting to feel the fatigue of that quick pace to halfway, and then that surge in pace in the pretty much 2/3 of the way through the course. Which meant that the predicted race time did pick up again and is now falling off again. So now is really crunch time. If they want to go after that course record, they're going to have to keep pushing on. If they want to just settle down to racing for the victory here today, then they probably will see a little bit of feet being taken off the gas and a little bit of energy being conserved for that final kilometre run into the finish.
Well, the predicted race time is dropping towards last year's course record. They've still got about 20 seconds in hand. But I suppose when you're thinking of victory, you're not thinking of the time at all. And we have just heard from the course, incidentally. We've been talking about Tedesse, Abraham Tedesse of the Eritrean-born Swiss. He's currently in 13th position. Less than 5k to go now. 3 Ethiopians extending the great tradition of victory in this Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. They've won every year for the last 10 years in both men's and women's races. Not too sure in the women's race this year, but absolutely no chance, one would think, of Saina now bridging that gap. The Kenyan who was in 4th place when we last saw him being caught by yet another Ethiopian, Tamru. So Negesa and Molla rallying and relegating Mengstu again to 3rd place, but he's right in the lee of them.
Yeah, it'd be hard to put your money on who might come out on top here now. I think Mengstu, certainly maybe the more experienced, certainly has the fastest personal best of the trio. Molla doesn't have a personal best yet, of course, over this distance. Negesa tried to control it but wasn't able to maintain that surge that he put in terms of taking the pair of them away from Mengstu. And I think once you reel them back in psychologically, that has to give Mengstu a boost, that he has managed to bridge that gap back to the leaders. He's now taking a little bit of a breather from that, sitting in the back of that pack and gathering his energy maybe for one more assault on this victory.
Well, we did briefly see Saina of Kenya, who was maintaining that gap back to Tanru. So Saina of Kenya is 4th, Tamru of Ethiopia is 5th, and Chepngetich and Degefa still together.
Yep, they are separated a little bit. Chepngetich still likes to move alongside the pacemakers there, but I think it looks as though there's a little bit less bounce in her stride, certainly, and she must be fatiguing. And we can see that predicted race time has slipped back a little bit, but still well inside course record pace and indeed personal best pace.
So both races, well, certainly the women's race, should be a new course record. The men's is not so sure because we've got a trio at the head of a men's race, but with Chepngetich and former winner and 2nd placer in this race, Degefa, right in behind her. Well, it looks as if that rally by Mengstu may have put paid to his chances. He's dropped back off again, so that's a good 15 meters. And Negesa and Molla still look very, very tidy in the lead in this Dubai Marathon this morning.
Yeah, it seems like Negesa and Molla working together, throwing down a surge. It remains to be seen whether they can maintain that. They may, of course, have been bluffing a little bit with the first surge and then allowing Mengstu to come back, letting him think that they were tired when in fact they had a little bit more left to give, or they may just be trying to do that again now and trying to scare him into submission. Certainly that gap isn't yet enough to break the string that's attaching Mengstu to the lead here in this race, but it does appear to be growing and growing with every stride at the moment.
That graphic you just saw, incidentally, is related to the women's race. The men are, of course, well on their way to 40k, whereas the women are still a few k behind, but not very much at all. 35k in 1:54 exactly, with De Gefa still on the tail of Ruth Chepngetich of Kenya.
De Gefa finds her bottle again. Chepngetich struggled to get hers. I think she does now have it. But yeah, I guess you can say that if you're struggling to find it in the beginning, then as the race wears on and your concentration certainly becomes harder to concentrate as you fatigue in a marathon. So it's only going to get more difficult to locate those bottles, and maybe that's something that Chepngetich can take away and work on before her next marathon, because when you're trying to bounce back as well, it's not that long. We talked about 50-something days from Istanbul to here. You really need to be on top of your fueling in the race, because your body has got to be redlining it for a lot of it when you run two personal best marathons so close together. And now it's De Gefa for the first time who almost takes advantage of that little bit of a struggle, and she's pushing the pace on significantly now.
Well, there's an immediate response from Chepngetich, but after all the disasters, or the minor disasters she's had with her drinks at the previous table, she'd have thought she'd have figured it out by now. Nevertheless, 2 men and 2 women at the head of the 2019 20th edition of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. The sun is beginning to show, but it's not getting appreciably warmer, and it's far too late to be having any great deleterious effect on these runners anyway. As you can see, the men now approaching 40 kilometers. If you want a time to look for, last year's 40k time by the winner Geramo, who did 2:04, last year's 40k was 1:57.41.
And that gap is about the same back to Mengstu. I think he's starting to look behind, though. He's checking on the progress of what was Saina and Tamru behind him, which is significant. It shows that he's more focused on maintaining that third position rather than trying to close that gap, to bridge that gap back up to the 2 leaders. So now it is between Molla and Nagasa. Appear to have it all to themselves over this last couple of kilometers. So who has more left in their legs? The debutant maybe looks as though he's got a little bit more bounce in his stride. That can be deceptive. Nagasa doesn't run with as much of a bounce in the beginning as Molla has done. You can see both of them very, very focused, and kind of them to be in different coloured vests for us to pick out now.
Well, there's also the interesting factor then that when Adola did that 2:3:46 in Berlin 15-16 months ago, that was the fastest debut. Now Molla is potentially on a time which could beat that, so that's just an additional factor as we come into the latter stage of this race. 1:57.16. Goodness me, they're almost they're half a minute up on last year's time.
Yeah, I think last year we did see a significant slowing off of the pace between 35 and 40 kilometers, and then it picked up again as they raced into the finish to just miss out on that sub 2:04 clocking. I think the organisers were disappointed. The clock did show 2:03.59 as Geramo crossed the line, but it was of course rounded up. And if we look at that split again, it has slowed down between 36 and 40k, but not quite as much. Still maintained a sub 15-minute 5k clocking, and now they are maintaining that pace, if not picking it up slightly, as we come down to this final battle into the finish and who will take top honours today.
Well, it certainly looks as if it's going to be a sub 2:04 race here finally for the organisers, so they'll be gratified. But which one of these two guys is it? The debutant who's going to pick up the $100,000 prize to go with his 250 grand that he won in the half marathon in Riyadh a few months ago, or Nagasa, who is knocking 5 minutes off his best time? Here's a guy who's been consistently 2:09, 2:10, 2:11, and he's running sub 2:4 pace at the moment.
So having an outstanding run. We got some idea of the gaps there. It's 9 seconds back to Mengstu, and then behind that it's over a minute now back to Saina. So there's no coming back from that. The only person who can maybe get themselves back into this race at this stage is Mengstu, but that's not looking too likely now as we're approaching the final mile of the race, and game faces on the both of them, but maybe a little bit more strain showing on the face of Nagasa. Molla very, very focused on the road ahead of him, probably running through in his mind his strategy in the closing stages of this race. Is he going to let Nagasa dictate the pace until the final straight and then unleash what he has left? Certainly Nagasa has got to be worried about the finishing pace.
Well, it's not a given that if you're a really fast 5K runner that you're going to have the better sprint, but he's got to be happy knowing that he can run 12:59 for a 5,000 meters. Molla, he's the marathon debutant. He's hung in there. We thought he might be a real surprise in this race. He may be the fastest ever debutant, whatever happens here. But what a terrific race we're coming into the final stages of this Dubai Marathon.
Yeah, you can say that Molla has honed his racing skills over the half marathon distance with that big victory in Riyadh that he picked up, and he also has that 60:34 half marathon personal best, which is significantly faster than Nagasa has recorded over a half marathon distance. But the marathon's the marathon, and it's all about how well you are prepared for that particular distance, and it can be a special beast to tame, but Molla's done a very good job of it so far today, and now he inches ahead. And is he starting to open up some daylight for the first time there?
Well, I don't think Nagasa is going to let him get away with that. I mean, he still looks pretty light on his feet. Whatever's going to happen here in this last kilometre, or less than a kilometre now, we're going to have an absolutely terrific finish here in this 20th running of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. There's the 7-star Burj Al Arab Hotel in the background, and we're getting a 7-star performance from this pair of Ethiopians. The debutant Molla to the left, Nagasa, the 2:09 guy who's running substantially faster than he's ever run in his life before. What a great race we've got here.
Really exciting race, and on the other side of the road you can catch a glimpse of some of the mass marathon runners making their way out onto that Jumeirah Loop as they're going to make now the final turn in front of the Madinat into the home straight, and they will see the finish and they will hear the roar of the Ethiopian crowd waiting for them in the finishing straight, and Molla has a gap.
Well, that looks fairly conclusive at the moment, given there's only about 400 meters left to run. Getaneh Molla, the Ethiopian debutant. He's running to potentially, well, certainly a course record, we think, but potentially the fastest ever debut in the men's marathon. He's got about 200 meters left to run. He's going to be finishing right in front of, at least a couple of thousand of his compatriots, making a lot of noise right across from us at the finish line. But Ethiopians rule yet again, certainly as far as the men's race goes here in the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. 2019 version. Getaneh Molla, he's even a little wave there. He's still got a couple of 100 meters left, but that, Paula Radcliffe, I think, is a substantial margin now between him, and he's going to win this race.
I think it is. It's a little bit of a worried look over his shoulder, and Nagasa, if he's got anything left in the tank, will seize on that little bit of a small sign of weakness and throw everything that he has into trying to catch Moller. But I think Moller is more concerned about whether he's got enough room to celebrate over the final 100 meters of this race. He needs to put his eyes focused on the clock on the screen ahead of him as well, because it is a very fast time. Is he going to break that debutant record? I think he is.
Well, they're right in front of us now, and there's Moller. He's about to cross the finish line. 2:03, just past 2:03, and they've broken the course record by almost half a minute. Marathon debutant Getane Moller of Ethiopia runs just over 2 hours, 3 minutes and 30 seconds, beats his compatriot Hepesa Negasa, who's also shattered his personal best time. So another Ethiopian triumph here in the men's race at the Dubai Marathon.
And there is Mengstu coming in for third place. He's not going to be too far outside of his personal best either. That stands at 2:04.06, so he's just going to miss that. But that's a strong run for third place from him.
Mengstu, he was second last year, just eased out of victory in the final strides. Comes in for third this year. But there you can see 2:03.34. for Getane Moller.
So once again, Dubai makes its mark on the sheet of marathon running performances. Early in the year, lays down the gauntlet to the other marathoners. And how many runners are we going to get under 2:05 this year? Can Saina make it in to make it 4 under that 2:05?
Well, the Kenyan has hung in there, and he's going to be right, well, no, probably not, maybe just a second over 2:05. Nevertheless, once he'd been dropped, he kept hanging in there, and Tamru looks as if he's going to be fourth.
Yeah, personal bests all around for Saina and Tamru in fourth and fifth there. And pretty much Mengstu is the only one who hasn't run a personal best out there today. Moller's was a given.
Well, it seems like Negasa is pretty happy, and so he should be. He's absolutely shattered his personal best. He's done 2:03.40 when he was a 2:09.14 guy. Gezahegne, another Ethiopian, coming into the finishing straight with just about 100 meters left to run. So Saina, the only Kenyan interloper in the top 8 at the moment. Just over 2:06. Still extraordinarily good times here in Dubai, as always. Tekele coming through now. Just about 50 meters left. I mean, these are still good times.
These are very, very respectable times indeed, particularly when you consider the pace that they went through halfway in. So when you go through halfway in 61.5 or so, it's going to be hard work for that second half. And if you're coming in a 2:06 clocking, you've got to think that maybe with more even pacing, these guys have to be capable of running even quicker.
So we've seen the fastest men's debut in history. Not by a lot, but a dozen seconds faster than his compatriot Taguya Odola ran in Berlin 15 months ago. Getane Moller has run 2:03.34. He's won $100,000 in his debut race here at the 2019 Standard Chartered Marathon. And over to the women's race, Paula.
I mean, now it looks as though we have Chepngetich ahead of De Geefer. I'm trying to see how big that gap is behind her. I can see some other runners not too far behind. I'm not sure if De Geefer is with those male pacers. Yes, she is. So there are your lead two in the women's race with what, maybe 20-meter gap between the two?
With exactly 3 kilometers to run.
So we saw De Geefer throw down the gauntlet, surge a little bit, Chepngetich respond to that, and then she is the one who has maintained that pace, the better of the two at this stage, and she now must have the finish in her sights. And will she put a bit of a dampener on the Ethiopian party at the finish line here?
Well, we've had a course record in the men's race. We've had the fastest debut in history by Getane Molla. Are we going to get another course record? I mean, it's very much a likelihood given the terrific early pace set mostly by Ruth Chepngetich. Although that said, De Geefer really stayed in right behind her for the majority of the race. Well, 2:19.11, and she's well almost 2 minutes inside that at the moment if she maintains this pace.
And she does look as though she's picked up the pace as she has moved away. That has to give her a little bit of a confidence boost to move out ahead. And yes, you can see there she's significantly picked up the pace through 37, 38, 39 kilometers. And if she maintains that, I think we're going to see her maybe get down close to that 2:17 barrier again.
Well, 15 months ago, Ruth Chepngetich's personal best time set in Istanbul was 2:22 plus. She went back on November the 11th, 2018, just a couple of months ago, and she ran 2:18.35 to become the 7th fastest all-time woman in history. And here she is looking as if she might beat that 2:18.35 by up to a couple of minutes. She's certainly well inside the 2:19.11 course record that was set by Rosa Dereji of Ethiopia last year. And it looks as if she's going to break that Ethiopian stretch of victories going back 10 years, certainly on the women's side in this Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon.
Yeah, she's looking very composed now, keeping that pace, pouring on the pressure onto De Geefer to try and maintain her even in sight in this race. And she'll soon see the sight of the Burj Al Arab and the Madinat up ahead of her and know that that turn into the finish is approaching.
And here we have the men's winner, Getane Molla of Ethiopia, the fastest debutant in history. He's going to be talking to our colleague Guy Horn down on the finish line shortly, as we watch Chepngetich over to the finish line, and Guy Horn.
Welcome, congratulations, the new winner and a championship time for the Dubai Marathon. How are you feeling now about your race?
Excuse me, can you tell this guy? Look at me. انت كاميرا كام؟
መጀመሪያ አመሰግናለሁ።
انت كاميرا
ደስ
كام؟
የሚል ውድድር ነው።
حط اندي
ያልጠበቁት ውድድር ነበር። በጣም ደስ ይላል በማሸነፍ።
First of all, thank you for organizers, and beside of that, I don't accept to run this time. I ran very well. I thanks God.
And how was your experience here in Dubai as a place to run fast times? Your whole treatment, your experience, the ambience?
እዚህ ላይ አገኘው የምትለው ልምድ አለ ወይ?
አይ ከመጀመሪያ ከመሆን አንጻር በጣም ደስ ይላል። ማራቶን የመጀመሪያ ነው። የሰዎችን ምኖችን ቦታውም ለወደፊት ላለው ማራቶን የተሻለ መሮጥ እንደምችል ልምድ የወሰድኩበት ውድድር ነው። በጣም ደስ ይላል።
Dubai Marathon is first marathon for me. I learn a lot. I know how it's paced. The course also, it's very nice. It's a good day for us.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you.
That was Getane Molla telling us about his experience as the fastest ever male debutant in history in the marathon. He's certainly broken the course record here too, and won himself $100,000 in the process.
And less than 2 kilometers left to go for Ruth Chepngetich, and certainly if you were looking for ideal conditions to run a marathon in, you couldn't look much further than the conditions that they've had today. Relatively low humidity. In fact, that's been the probably hardest condition they've had to deal with. Temperature's pretty much perfect. zero wind, no direct sun, and as we talked about, the road surface perfect for racing on, and Ruth Chepngetich taken full advantage of that, and she is now stretching that gap back to Worknesh de Gever more and more with every stride and pushing on fast towards this finish. And I think she's definitely got that sub 2:17 clocking in her sights.
Well, she's absolutely flying, isn't she? I mean, in the last couple of kilometres, she's put well over 100 metres between herself and the former winner, de Gever of Ethiopia. She's going to be the first Kenyan to win this race in well over a decade. And she's going to better her personal best, which was already a terrific time and the 7th fastest women's all time. And she's going to beat that by a couple of minutes, it looks.
Yes, without any shadow of a doubt, she's going to set a world lead for the others to aim at in the big races to come up later in the year. Incidentally, for the men's race, only Dubai 2018 has ever had 3 runners sub 2:04:30 before, and that's happened today. And if both of these women could go under 2:18, that has only happened once before in London in 2017 with Mary Keitany and Tirunesh Dibaba. Certainly we look as though we're going to have one lady significantly under 2:18, and now she's indeed closing on those Japanese runners who were running ahead of her. That is Morihashi, I think, that she's going to move alongside. So he's going to know that no, he's not having a particularly bad day. It's just that Ruth Chepngetich is having a particularly good day, and indeed has really picked up this pace in stunning style over the last 4 kilometers of the race. She looked as though she was starting to fatigue a little bit between 30 and 35k. No chance of that. Now she's going from strength to strength, and we may even find that the final kilometer will have been the fastest kilometer of the race.
Well, it really is a case of where she's going to be on the all-time list when she finishes this race. She's going to smash the course record, so she's going to get a bonus for that. She's run an absolutely terrific race. She's fronting the life out of Morihashi, the Japanese, running beside her. But he's running more or less the sort of times that he's run in the past. She, of course, is running a couple of minutes faster than she's ever run before. The women's all-time marathon list, of course, begins with my co-commentator, Paula Radcliffe, 2 hours, 15 minutes and 25 seconds, set in 2003. We then go to 2:17:01. Mary Keitany, Paula did 2:17:18, 2:17:42. Tirunesh Dibaba 2:17:50.
Certainly in danger, and I think she will see that soon up on the finish clock over the finish gantry, not too far ahead of her. She's approaching the first of the grandstands now, which lead then into the final 100 meters.
Well, I don't doubt the Ethiopian contingent will be just as happy for her as they would have been for de Gever. Maybe not entirely, but they should be, because this is an absolutely sensational performance by Ruth Chepngetich. She's hoving into the finishing straight now. 2:16:35, so it's going to be so close. She's got a couple of 100 meters left to run. 2:17:01 is Mary Keitany's second fastest time in history. She's putting into it everything that she can. The countdown, I think, is just going to get the better of her. Nevertheless, what a fantastic victory for Ruth Chepngetich of Kenya. She smashes the course record by 2 minutes. She's the 3rd fastest woman in history and has run absolutely sensationally.
And here comes Worknesh de Gever. She hasn't given up on this at all. She is fighting for that sub 2:18 clocking. I think she is going to get it. She's going to put herself right up there on those lists as well. A huge personal best for her. Well over 2 minutes for that personal best. She's now going to cross the line in second place in around about 2:17:41:42.
So we've seen the 3rd and 4th fastest women's time in history this morning. Rewritten history at the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. We had a couple of course records last year that we thought were absolutely wonderful. Well, they have just been blown out of sight this morning on a really temperate day. Very fortunate with the conditions. There's De Geffer. She ran terrific. She's won this race. This is the second time that she's finished second, but she's had to give best too. There she is, Ruth Chepngetich, an absolutely wonderful winner this morning.
You can see just discussing how the race went with her compatriot Emmanuel Sainer, who also ran a personal best, but she has really smashed hers. And what's next for her? She only needs to take another 50 days off or so, and she can come back and race again.
Well, we certainly look forward to the next time that she'll be running. This is a new star in the constellation of women's marathons. And we'll certainly be having a chat with her later. Well, the confidence that she showed at the press conference a couple of days ago was certainly not misplaced. She was very quietly spoken. She didn't brag at all. She just seemed absolutely confident in her capabilities.
Yeah, wasn't afraid to take the race by the scruff of the neck either. She was challenged a little bit by De Geffer when she moved to the front, and then that was enough. She was moving on with every stride from then on, and that gap was just growing and growing back to still an outstanding performance by Worknesh De Geffer in second place. And I think we can safely say that Dubai is a happy hunting ground for Worknesh De Geffer. 3 marathons in her career, all 3 run here, all with top placings and getting significantly faster with each time that she races here. She must be looking forward to next year.
Well, you're also talking about big gaps. The third woman is yet to come in. And we're looking up the finishing straight. Still no sign of her. But that's certainly part of the worst view that you're going to see this morning. And the sun is up over on our right. And here is Edessa, who was hung in there. Ethiopian Edessa, she's going to be finishing third here. She's going to be outside 2:20, but nevertheless, an excellent race for her.
A significant personal best for her, and that's a tough way to run a marathon when you go through halfway as fast as she did, indeed run to 25, almost to 30k as fast as she did, then to hang on and run a 2:21 marathon clocking. That's phenomenal running. So she will be rewarded with almost a 3-minute personal best. Third place, a lot of support from the Ethiopian crowd just before the finish line. She's just going to miss 2:21, but not going to be far outside.
Well, there you go, about 2:21.04, something like that. And certainly bested her best, as Paula said, by close to 3 minutes. And she finished very strongly, despite the fact that she dropped off quite rapidly at one stage. She still looks in pretty good condition. So Ruth Chepngetich broke that 10-year stretch of Ethiopian victories in the women's race here at the Dubai Marathon. But it was pretty much Ethiopians all the way in the men's race, apart from Emmanuel Sainer of Kenya, who finished 4th. So we've had the fastest debut in history. And here's another woman coming in, Makasha, in fact. And these are still very good times, Paula Radcliffe. 2:22 for her.
Definitely, Worknesh Makasha, 2:22 on the clock, and she probably has about 200 meters, less than that, 150 meters left to run. So safe to say she also is going to smash her personal best. Currently stands at 2:25.57 from last year, and she has had a lonely race over the second half of this race, but looking strong now as she comes into the finish. So apart from the Ruth Chepngetich victory, an Ethiopian clean sweep here of the rest of the places, and a lot of personal best as we saw in the men's race.
So another Ethiopian comes through the finish line. Mekasha. And we're shortly going to be talking to the women's race winner, Ruth Chepngetich, over to the finish line.
My race was good. I am happy because I won this Dubai Marathon. I'm proud of my effort.
And weather conditions and Worknesh as your competitor, how was it racing today? What was your strategy and did it work?
My strategy for this race, I wanted to win this race. So my friend Worknesh, she's a strong lady. So I use my mind very well so that I can manage to win this race. It was a tough race. It was not easy. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, she bettered her personal best by 1.5 minutes. She's now the 3rd fastest woman of all time. Worknesh Degefa, who was mentioned there in that interview with race winner Ruth Chepngetich, is now the 4th fastest woman of all time. She did 2:17.41 behind Ruth Chepngetich's 2:17.07. And there's confirmation of the men's race. Fastest ever debut in history. Close to 6 minutes. Asafa Mengstu, he was 2nd last year and just bettered his personal best by finishing 3rd this year. As fast as he hoped, but he sneaked into 10th place.
Coming in, Sinteu Lowerton coming into the finish. She's made her today, but she won with the early group and maintained contact with that. So, as we said, for many of the women in this race, it's been a lonely race over the second half of the race. Not too many other runners around them, but she stuck to her task, stayed well focused on that, and running strongly into the finish. She is well clear of the next lady behind her.
So a Kenyan victory in the women's race, followed by 4 Ethiopians: Worknesh Degesa, Worknesh Edessa, and Mekasha. And finishing there in 5th place, Lua Tegna. Cynthia, her first name? Cynthia Lua Tegna. Big gaps back here.
There is Rama Tusa coming in to finish. So, as we mentioned earlier on, she had raced in New York in November, finished 5th there. Been a bit more of a lonely run there today, but she's getting a lot of urging on and help from Hussein in the closing stages, and the finish is in sight for her now.
So under 2:27 for Ramatusa of Ethiopia. And Tega, yet another Kenyan. Mulahad Tega, beg your pardon, yet another Ethiopian. She's got a personal best of just over 2:25, so she's a little slower this morning. Nevertheless, a top 10 finish. 7th place there for Mulahab Tsega of Ethiopia. And there you are, confirmation of Ruth Chepngetich's 3rd fastest time by a woman in history. 2 hours 17 minutes and 7 seconds. Worknesh Degefa, 2nd time she's she's finished 2nd in this race. She's a former winner also. 2:17.41, substantially faster than her previous best. And Worknesh Edessa hung in there after she'd been dropped in the latter stage of the race to record another personal best by a substantial margin, 2:21.05. Well, we're shortly going to take a look at the start of the 10K race. But what we've got coming up for you is the victory ceremony, or a couple of victory ceremonies for these elite marathons here in Dubai. And as the 10K runners make their way to the start, the sun is coming up in earnest. Well, there's a bit of glassware that's soon going to be adorning the sideboards of the victorious runners here this morning. There's the assembly at the start line. And they've still got very good conditions, Paula. It really hasn't warmed up very much at all here.
No, it hasn't. It's stayed pretty much around the 17 degrees that it was at the start of the marathon back at 6 a.m. this morning. In the darkness, the only difference is that the sun is now out, not shining too brightly though. And as you said, no wind at all. Pretty much perfect conditions for a nice, brisk, quick 10K over a course that's proven itself yet again this morning to be the place to come if you want to record a fast time.
So these 10K runners, I suspect anything, well, just over 30 minutes down to an hour and 30 minutes. Nevertheless, getting out there for your Sunday morning run, or rather Friday morning run in this case. Can't be better.
And there they are on their way over the 10-kilometer course. Some quick starters there, and there are others spread out back down the road, and that's a wonderful sight for the strength of running here in Dubai in the Arab Emirates, and some personal best of luck to everybody out there taking part today.
Well, last year there were about 13,500 runners in this 10K, and they're expected to be around about 15,000 this year. Well, and this guy looks like a pretty serious 10K runner. Nice form and pretty rapid at the moment.
Yeah, a little bit of a mix at the front. There might have been some people there who might have just wanted to get on camera shot for the first couple of 100 meters of that race. Other people pacing their race a bit more sensibly.
We're just looking at the 15,000 10K runners setting off this morning in Dubai while we're waiting for the victory ceremony of the two elite races that we have thoroughly enjoyed here today. 2 course records, 2 super fast times, the fastest men's debut in history, and we've seen 2 new performances in the women's race, the 3rd and 4th fastest in history for Ruth Chepngetich of Kenya and Worknesh Degefa of Ethiopia.
Yes, once again, significant times being thrown down there over the 20 years now of its existence. The Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon has become known as the place to go to record a fast marathon and to see some great racing. no change here today. In fact, an improvement on that, with records being set once again. Fastest debutant, number of men under 2:04:30, number of women under 2:18. Set the bar high for the rest of the year and indeed for itself in years to come.
Well, back in the year 2000, the inaugural race was won by Wilson Kibet of Kenya, who also won for the next couple of years. He ran 2:12:21. Ramila Burungalova of Russia, who also won again the following year, she ran 2:40:22. So over the 20 years of the race, we've come down from 2:12 and 2:40 to 2:03 and 2:17.
We may have forgotten to also point out that for Worknesh Degefa in second place, that was actually an Ethiopian record, a significant Ethiopian record. She takes that away from the babyface destroyer, from Tirunesh Dibaba, and it's the 4th fastest ever, as we have said.
So lots of congratulations to Worknesh Degefa. As we said also, she's run 3 marathons in her career. They've all been in Dubai. She won one of them and she's finished second in the other 2.
And for Getane Molla, that was the 9th fastest time ever on a record eligible course, for taking out Boston, of course, and the 6th fastest runner ever. Negasa is now the 8th fastest.
So Dubai adds to its reputation for having super fast races, most runners under 2:05, 2:06, etc.
And also the record, if you're interested at home, for the combined winning times. Dubai this year, 2019, combined winning time of 4 hours 20:41. That's the men and women's times added together. Only Berlin 2018 faster. They might have had a bit of help there from Eliud Kipchoge. And in London 2018 is third with 4 hours 22:48. So Berlin has the fastest 4:19:50.
Just pick out a couple of names from the history of this race. We mentioned earlier Haile Gebrselassie, the multiple world champion, world record holder and Olympic champion. Won this race in 2008, 2009 and 2010. All pretty rapid times. In fact, when he did 2:04:53 back in 2008, that of course was one of the fastest times in history. A little slower on subsequent occasions, but not by much. But some interesting debuts here. Haile Abshiro in 2012 of Ethiopia ran 2:04:23. So you can see that, 6-7 years ago, Dubai was having times in the 2:04 range. Lalissa Desissa, who went on to a great career, still running very fast, of course. He did 2:04:45 in 2013. There's confirmation of Marcel Hoog's victory by, 4.5 minutes. 1:24:08 for Hoog. Second victory for him here in Dubai. Hiroyuki Yamamoto of Japan, 1:28:31. That's sort of the time that he expected. I think Hoog did a bit faster than everybody expected here. Hiroki Nishida, also of Japan, 1:30:14. They were expected to push Hoog, but as you can see, he won by 4.5 minutes from Yamamoto.
Ethiopian party still going strong. They've turned their attention now to encouraging all of the athletes in the 10K, which is going on at the moment.
Well, as we said earlier, there's a lot of Ethiopian people who work here in the Gulf states, so they're going to have loads of their compatriots to cheer on when they come down this finishing straight in just over half an hour's time. Well, with that look at the only 7-star hotel in the world, the Burj Al Arab, one of the features on the very fast marathon course here. We've had an absolutely fantastic morning yet again at the 20th edition of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. Getaneh Molla of Ethiopia won the race, the men's race, in 2:03:34. That's the 6th fastest in history. It's the fastest ever debut. Ruth Chepngetich, meantime, in the women's race ran 2:17:07. That's the 3rd fastest time in history. She was followed by Worknesh Degefa, a former winner here, who ran the 4th fastest time in history. Paula Radcliffe, a summation from you on a wonderful morning here.
I think once again the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon proved itself to be one of the fastest, if not the fastest, courses out there. If you want to come and run a fast time early in the year, you need to get yourself here to Dubai. Congratulations to all of the runners, all of the records out there today. Congratulations to the organisers and to Dubai as well. And good luck to everybody currently out there taking part in the 10K.
And thanks to Paula Radcliffe, still the fastest woman in the world. And thanks to all of you for being with us this morning. We look forward to seeing you next year at the 21st edition of the Standard Chartered Dubai Marathon. good.